Welcome back. Well, you've heard it plenty of times from the US president, record low unemployment, the stock market at record highs, and Donald Trump has even claimed the US is the economic envy of the entire world. But that doesn't mean everyone is prospering. Millions of Americans still struggle to get by, and an increasing number of elderly workers fear they'll never be able to retire. To get some perspective, I met with older workers, older than 70, including an 80-year-old, still working the supermarket checkout.
We're going to sing happy birthday to Thelma. Happy birthday.
Welcome to the golden years.
Happy birthday to
reaching another major milestone. And still trying to make ends meet. At 80 years old, Thelma Beard is working the checkout.
Did you ever think you'd be 80 and still at work?
Born in 1938 towards the end of the Great Depression, Thelma was one of 10 children. The great-grandmother has 2 children of her own and worked in sales most of her career. But with no 401k retirement savings account, she now works part-time, 5 days a week at Kroger's supermarket.
Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
What do you think about the fact that she is 80 years old?
That's amazing.
While Thelma enjoys the socializing, she also needs the income. Her colleagues are 78-year-old Marion Gillum and 72-year-old former civil engineer John Huggins, who last year lost a leg to diabetes.
So, John, you've been working here for 7, almost 8 years. Right. When will you retire?
Well, I retired once already. I just can't sit around.
As life expectancy grows and retirement savings shrink, more seniors are having to work. In the US, 20% of people aged over 65 are now back in the workforce. That's the highest rate in 55 years.
They have a great work ethic. We love having them here. They do everything you ask them to do without question. They're never late and they never call out.
The economy is maybe better than
US President Trump claims this is the greatest economy in the history of America and the best time ever to look for a job. These hard-working seniors disagree and say his $1.5 trillion tax cut did not trickle down to them.
Do you think life's getting any easier, or is it about the same?
It's about the same, it getting worse. No, it really didn't change.
No, I haven't seen it, no.
Social Security does have a limit on how much money they can make. So what we're willing to do is we work with them on that so we make sure that they don't go over their hours.
Some of the richest people in the US choose to work. President Trump is 72. The oldest Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is 85, while media mogul Rupert Murdoch is 87. But unlike those at the top of their fields, most working seniors don't have the savings to survive.
Just got a job as a lifeguard in Savannah. I'm 85 and I want to go home.
It's a cute ad, but it has a serious message. More than a third of older Americans have no retirement savings. And if you're earning the minimum wage, which is as low as $7.25 an hour, it's near impossible to save.
Hence, all the people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s who are continuing to work either as Walmart greeters in some cases, or they're working in a local shop. We're not really seeing pay raises go up, right? And the inflation is kind of eating up whatever pay raises people are seeing.
At least these folks enjoy the job.
So you'll be celebrating your 80th birthday here too?
Yeah, I'm planning on it.
Some great attitudes there, despite the fact that they are working well into their 70s and 80s. I want to discuss this a bit more with CNN political analyst Joshua Green, who joins me now from Washington. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
On the one hand, it's great that you've got employers like Kroger offering to hire workers that are well into their 70s and 80s, who some employers might think, hang on a sec, they might call out sick or they might have frail health. But on the other, why are we seeing this when we hear the president talk about such a booming economy?
Well, we're seeing this because in the U.S. there is a growing crisis in retirement savings. Social Security, government pensions don't provide enough money for many people to live on as the costs of products and the costs of health care continue to rise. So a lot of people who would like to retire at age 65, age 66, find that they have to keep working in order to afford to live.
We saw the $1 trillion tax cut
from the Trump administration. Why hasn't that trickled down?
Well, because it's overwhelmingly slanted first toward businesses and corporations. Those were the permanent tax cuts, and then there were temporary tax cuts passed. But the overwhelming benefit of those tax cuts went to rich people, not to poor, middle class, working class people. Really only got a drop in the bucket. And one of the issues that is framing the midterm elections here in the U.S. Are Democrats saying, hey, listen, Republicans passed a $1 million, $2 million tax cut, and it didn't benefit ordinary working voters, so isn't it time to fire Republicans and elect Democrats to Congress? And that's the big fight that will be playing out here on November 6th.
Yeah, the idea of that $1 trillion tax cut, according to what we're hearing from the Trump administration, was that big corporations would give everyone a pay rise.
Well, if you look at the numbers, that is not what has happened. Certainly, we have seen a trend of large employers like Amazon.com, for instance, agreeing to lift wages to $15 above the U.S. national minimum wage, which hasn't gone up in years and years. So there is some movement on wages, but by and large, wages in the U.S. have been stagnant since the financial crisis a decade ago, and meanwhile, costs have continued to rise, and that puts a squeeze on a lot of voters who are worried not just about wages, but also about the cost of health care. And of course, here in the U.S., there's a lot of anger over non-economic issues, just a desire to put a check on Trump by electing Democrats to Congress and hoping that they can help not just to put a check on Trump, but also to do what they have campaigned for in states and cities across the country, which is to finally lift the minimum wage so that workers like the ones focused on in your package will have more resources when they get into their 70s and their 80s.
Josh, since winning the presidential election, President Trump has mentioned the stock market gains more than 200 times and spoken about record unemployment. How much credit can he take for that, and what's the risk of taking credit?
Well, I certainly think he deserves some of the credit. I mean, the stock market, with the exception of the last 2 weeks, has gone up substantially since he was elected. Part of that is because he's rolled back regulations. Part of that is because he did pass this big corporate tax cut, which has increased profits. That's certainly helped. But if you look at the long trend line, the economy has been growing since Barack Obama's first term. So I think a better way to frame this may be that Trump hasn't done anything to inhibit the Obama recovery. The problem with the recovery, both under Obama and under President Trump, however, is that the gains have accrued mainly to people at the top of the income scale. And if you look at working class and poor people, they haven't participated in that because many of them don't own stock. They don't have 401k retirement plans. So these gains are primarily going to people who do, who by and large are upper middle class or wealthy.
Interesting to note, though, he takes credit when the stock market goes up and blames the Fed when it goes down. Josh Green.
That is exactly right.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Well, still to come, exclusive new footage showing a Saudi operative wearing Khashoggi's clothes after he was killed. We're going to have the latest on that video and the attempted cover-up when we go live to Turkey. Plus, Australia's Prime Minister delivers an emotional apology to sexual abuse victims. We'll hear some of their stories next.